Rain poured heavily over the city that evening, blurring the neon reflections on the slick streets. Inside a small cafe tucked between towering office buildings, a young woman sat by the window, nervously clutching her purse. Her fingers trembled as she glanced once more at the clock above the counter. 7:01 p.m. He was late. Her heart thudded in her chest, not just from anxiety, but from the quiet fear that maybe she didn't belong here at all. The cafe was modern, stylish, and warm, filled with laughter and the soft clinking of coffee cups. Everyone around her seemed to fit perfectly into this world of comfort and confidence. But she was just trying to hold herself together. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and that one moment of compassion can change an entire life, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Because what happened next, in that cafe on a rainy evening, would restore your faith in humanity. Her name was Sara Malik, 24 years old, recently graduated but unable to find a stable job. Life hadn't been kind to her lately. Her father had passed away the year before, and with her mother bedridden, Sara had been working part-time at a bookstore, barely earning enough to keep their electricity running. She hadn't been on a date in years, not since her ex left her for someone more ambitious, but her best friend Aisha had convinced her to try again. "It's just a blind date," she had said. "Who knows? Maybe it'll change your life." Now, as Sara sat waiting in her faded dress, the only decent one she owned, she felt ridiculous. Her shoes were slightly scuffed, her handbag was fraying at the edges, and she'd spent her last few hundred rupees just to get a cab here. The cafe was far more expensive than she imagined. Even the aroma of coffee felt rich. She prayed silently that whoever this man was, he wouldn't judge her too harshly. Then, the door opened. A man walked in, tall, poised, dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than she'd made in 6 months. His hair was neatly styled, his watch gleamed subtly, and yet his expression wasn't arrogant. It was quietly thoughtful. He looked around, searching, until his eyes landed on her. Sara's breath caught. Could this be him? He smiled softly and approached her table. "You must be Sara," he said, his voice deep but kind. She nodded, trying to hide her nervousness. His name, he said, was Arman. He didn't mention his last name and she didn't ask. She just assumed he was another young professional, someone successful probably, but not unreachable. As they began talking, the tension slowly faded. He asked about her favorite books, her hobbies, her dreams. He listened, really listened, without interrupting, without checking his phone. It had been so long since anyone looked at her that way, with genuine interest. The warmth in his eyes made her forget about the rain outside, about her worries, about everything that hurt. Hours passed like minutes. For the first time in months, Sara laughed, openly, freely, as if she was finally remembering what happiness felt like. But when the waiter came with the bill, her heart plummeted. She glanced at the total, and her blood ran cold. It was far more than she could afford, way more. She had just enough money for a simple coffee, not a full dinner with dessert and drinks. Her stomach twisted painfully. She tried to smile, to reach for her purse, to hide her panic. Maybe she could just say she forgot her wallet, or maybe she could excuse herself and never come back. Shame burned through her chest like fire. Arman noticed the way her hands trembled, the color draining from her face. "Sara," he said softly, "is everything all right?" She forced a shaky laugh. Yes, of course. I just, need to check something." She fumbled through her purse, pretending to look for her wallet, but tears welled up in her eyes before she could stop them. The truth hit her like a punch. She couldn't even pay for her own meal. And just then, she heard his voice again, calm, warm, reassuring. "It's on me." She froze. He smiled gently. "Don't worry about it, Sara. I invited you here, remember? Let me take care of it." Her eyes widened, and embarrassment flooded her cheeks. "No, I can't let you, please," he said quietly. "It's not about money, it's about enjoying this moment." The kindness in his tone broke something inside her. She wanted to protest, to stand up and leave, but instead tears slipped down her face. All her pride, all her exhaustion from holding life together, it just came pouring out. She whispered an apology, but Armand simply reached for a napkin and handed it to her. "You don't have to apologize for being human," he said softly. That single line, it shattered her walls. They talked for another hour after that, about life, about loss, about the strange unfairness of the world. Sara found herself telling him things she had never told anyone, about her father's illness, about skipping meals to save money, about pretending to be okay so her mother wouldn't worry. Armand listened without judgment, his eyes steady and sincere. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Armand wasn't just a kind man. He was Armand Qureshi, the CEO of one of the city's largest tech companies. He'd built his empire from the ground up, but success had come at a cost: loneliness, pressure, endless expectations. Tonight, though, he wasn't a CEO. He was just a man who wanted to feel something real again. When they finally left the cafe, the rain had stopped. The streets glistened under the streetlights, and the air smelled fresh. Armand offered her his umbrella, even though his car was parked right outside. She refused at first, but he smiled and said, "Then walk with me until yours comes." So they did, side by side, two strangers from completely different worlds, sharing quiet laughter under the soft drizzle. Over the next few weeks, Sara didn't expect to hear from him again. After all, why would someone like him care about someone like her? But to her surprise, he did. He texted her good morning, asked how her mother was doing, and sometimes dropped by the bookstore where she worked, pretending to browse just to see her smile. People began to notice. Her coworkers teased her gently, asking if the handsome customer was her boyfriend. Sara just blushed and shook her head. She didn't dare hope for something so impossible. But slowly, Armand became a constant in her life, a source of quiet strength she didn't know she needed. Then, one day, everything changed. Sara came home to find her mother's condition had worsened. The doctor's words echoed in her head. She needs immediate surgery. The cost was astronomical, far beyond what Sara could ever pay. She sold everything she could, borrowed from everyone she knew, but it wasn't enough. In desperation, she called Armand, not to ask for help, but because she needed someone to talk to. He listened in silence, then said softly, "Send me the hospital details." She panicked. "No, Armand, I didn't tell you for that reason. Please, I can't take your money." But he just replied, "Sara, this isn't charity, it's care. Let me do this." The next morning, the hospital called. The entire cost had been covered, anonymously, but she knew. Her mother's surgery went smoothly, and for the first time in years, Sara felt like she could breathe again. She tried to thank him, but he simply smiled and said, "You'd do the same if you could." From that moment on, something shifted between them. It wasn't just friendship anymore. It was something deeper, unspoken, and powerful. But Armand never once made her feel small, never reminded her of what he'd done. Instead, he encouraged her to dream bigger, to apply for better jobs, to believe that she was capable of more. Months passed, and Sara slowly built a new life. She landed a position at a publishing company, began writing on the side, and even managed to move her mother into a better home. Through it all, Armand was there, sometimes in person, sometimes through a message or a simple call that said, "I believe in you." 1 year later, they met again in that same cafe where it had all begun. The rain was falling softly outside, just like that night. Sara was different now, stronger, more confident, glowing with quiet pride. Armand looked at her with the same warmth, but this time there was something else in his eyes. Admiration. She smiled. "You know, I never got to repay you for that first bill," she said, half joking. He chuckled and leaned forward. "You already have," he replied. "Every time I see you smile, every time I see you win a battle you once thought you couldn't, you've already paid me back 1,000 times. Sara blinked away tears. "Why me, Armand? You could have anyone." He paused, then said something that would stay with her forever. "Because when everyone else saw what you lacked, I saw what you carried, the strength to keep going, even when life gave you nothing. That's worth more than anything money can buy. If this story has touched your heart, even a little, please don't forget to like, comment, and share it. And if you believe that one small act of kindness can change someone's entire life, subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of the good that still exists in the world." Before you go, I want you to comment below. Kindness never goes unnoticed. Because sometimes, the smallest gestures leave the biggest marks on a person's heart. As the cafe lights flickered softly and laughter filled the air, Sara realized something profound. Her life hadn't been saved by money or by luck. It was saved by compassion. A single moment of understanding had rewritten her destiny. She reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly, and said, "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." Armand smiled, his eyes glistening. "It's on me," he whispered again. And this time, Sara finally understood. It wasn't just about the bill. It was about everything that love, kindness, and humanity could pay for. When the world forgot their worth,